So good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see many people for the MISP Summit. So the third editions. Today, the objective is basically to talk about what we did the past year and what we want to do with MISP in the next months and even next 2 years, I would say. So we will talk about what we have done in the MISP project itself. We will quickly talk about a new project that we have, a new initiative called Cross Isaac. I will mention it just after. And then we have different talk of people using MISP or new things in MISP. We will have a talk with the integration of MISP and the Hive. We will have a talk about John regarding the use of MISP within Fidelis. And then we will have a kind of generic talk about the futures and so on. So if you have any questions, feel free to do it during the talk. We're not so many people, so it's fine. Don't hesitate. That's basically the idea. So for the past years, I would say MISP was growing more and more. So I will do a small recap of who is behind the scene and who is working, and then I will explain how we get the funding, and then what we did in the past years. So the first thing is MISP is a community-driven project. So it's not because one organization is leading right now the development that others could not come and so on. So it's really community-driven. Maybe some of you are joining on Gitter regularly and so on, so you see that we are basically open to all proposals and so on. We are quite flexible on things with MISP and so on. We have many projects surrounding MISP, so it's really a community around it. And that's very important for us because what really matters for us for MISP is not the software itself, but really the community of people basically developing things in MISP, but especially using MISP. That's great sense. What a service is, I mean. Okay, so indeed, Circle is one of the driving force, and I think it's the driving force behind MISP. But we have different models of partnership with others, and all organizations collaborate with us. So the thing is quite important is basically the different, or the versatility of communities. So the different kind of communities joining MISP or using MISP for different use cases. So for us, at least for the circle, we are a third, so we have to inform people. Maybe we need more chairs. There's still some space left here. So we basically need to inform our constituency about vulnerabilities, about incidents, about indicators, and so on. And basically, MISP is a tool that we use. So we basically lead the development, but we use it too. So we are really linked to this mantra, which is basically eating your own dog food, is we really want to design something that is useful for us, and at the same time, and it's nice, it's useful for others. That's basically our core idea behind. And then that's why we have a kind of diversity regarding the communities using MISP. At Circle, we basically manage various MISP. For example, we operate the one for FIRST, which is an international organization taking care of certs. And we have some others. So maybe some people in the audience today could join one of the communities, so feel free to get in touch with us. You can get access. And then more and more Isaacs are basically setting up their models, and they use MISP on the back end. So the funding aspect, because a lot of people ask, where is the money coming from for funding MISP? It's basically, for the past years, it was really, I would say 99% of the funding was coming from Circle, so our home organization. So we basically use the funding that we had for operating the certs for operating Circle MISP development. But at the same time, we were trying to find partnership with others to get some more funding to basically be quicker on some features and new functionalities in MISP. And for example, we had some kind of models where we had crowdfunding on some features. So some organization asked us about the features. We say, oh, might be useful for us too. And they say, okay, we have some budget left. And we had some budget left on our side, and we basically co-fund the development. That was one way to do it. We did it with various certs, some other organization. That's one of the models that we can do. We had some research partnerships too with universities regarding MISP, especially, for example, for the privacy-aware data structures. We had some partnership with getting students in, and then we can evaluate and testing new functionalities. So we had one with UCL, one with K11, regarding the use of MISP and the dataset itself, and build new tools. And for us, it's quite interesting because basically we have people that are experimenting things, and we see if we can incorporate it back into MISP. By the way, all the development that we are doing are all open source, public, so you see that that's why in the MISP project you have tons of repositories. It's because we have many parallel projects. Sometimes we have other partnership. We had a partnership with a company in Germany where they hire an additional student for specific development, and basically they were supporting us in that way. So it's a way of funding the project through third-party development. And then we had a partnership with other organizations that wanted to have their tools built into MISP, or at least interconnecting with it. And then we found an agreement with them. I will not mention all the tools, but you might see the tools that are talking about it. And I have a good news too. We get additional funding from the European Commission starting 1st September this year for a 2 years period to basically add some more development into MISP and some new features. So it's basically an additional funding that we get. So it's basically covering 75% of our funding, and we have to still fund 25%. But the model with that is basically the European Commission has the programs called Connecting Europe Facilities. And these programs is operating a sub-project called CSP, which is Core Services Platform, which is a platform that is used for the national governmental cert in Europe. And one of the tools, part of the CSP platform, is MISP. So that's why we basically get the funding too, is to better interact the MISP platform with the CSP program. So for us, it's an additional funding, and it's good news. For example, the current work that we do on Sticks 2.0 is basically supported by this funding, and that's why we are going faster on Sticks 2.0 export. Basically, we get someone in addition here, and Christian, who should be around, is one of the guys behind Sticks. So if you have Sticks question, ask him. Not for everything, but okay. By the way, regarding Sticks, we are part of Oasis CTI group, and we try to improve the Sticks standard, even if we see that it's still just a part of the puzzle. So, team at Circle, so that's basically everyone, so not all the team, but a majority of the team is working on MISP, so like that you have an overview of who is doing what. Raphael will do a presentation about the object after, and he's the one leading the PyMISP part. Sasha is doing all the Q&A part. He has a very good tendency to find bugs, so that's quite interesting too. Jar too, by the way, but that's a story. And then we have different people working on different areas in MISP, so like that, you know. So we basically do our incident response work, and at the same time we work on MISP, because it's one of our tools that we support. We did some significant improvement into automations and automatic deployment. Now, at every commit, we generate VMware image, VirtualBox image that you can download automatically. So we basically have kind of no complete automation chains for MISP, for testing and so on. And testing should be improved regarding APIs, but I think it's something that we are working on.
Yeah, and also on that hand, also deployment. So one of the things, until now, installation has been a bit of a pain, but now, thanks to development by Cedric, you can just have an instance up and running in 5 minutes or something.
So you have MISP background?
Yeah.
You can just set up, and then you have a full-blown MISP installation running and from scratch. Something else, we are working on some other standard too, like the new version of Mike 5.0 versions, and another project called KSUCO, for the one that maybe know about, is basically for forensic tools. It's what Europol and some others want to bridge on. And what we try as MISP, we are not bound to one format. We really try to basically support other formats, because that's the idea behind the tool, that it's useful and that other people can connect with their own format. Every year we have the question, so this year we had a slide about it. Everyone is asking about the governance of MISP. So if we don't have diagrams, usually we can say it's a kind of friendly dictatorship with chaos. That would be the definition of it. Now you have the official diagrams of this chaos. You have basically what we want to do. So we have a roadmap. So we talk about the roadmaps and the features that we want to do, and the future development. And it's based on feedback from people. For example, regarding Buck, John Barnonek has some very good use case regarding scalability and a very large set of data sets, which is very interesting for us for fixing bugs. we don't have in our use case, but that's quite interesting. So that means we get feedback from people, the idea and so on. Other open source projects like Cuckoo Sandbox, the Hive, for example, they come with idea and so on. We might have some discussion about case management and so on. That's something that might pop up in the future. And then we reserve a kind of area space for us where we do some experimental things. So that means that completely broken stuff, but sometimes it might work. So some of the projects like taxonomies and so on came from that place. So
generally we like to experiment with features. Sometimes we throw it away afterwards, sometimes we keep it. So it's an ongoing process of a lot of trial and error. So as I mentioned, basically the use case and the user that we have is growing. With the recent introduction of the MISP object, now it's becoming like very large. We have different use cases. In the past days, I got a request for having car plates and cars in MISP. So that's not our use case, but it's maybe the use case of some others. So that means we have a large user base, and that's the difficulty too, is that we still maintain the software into usable based, and based on the feedback, we need not to diverge too much from what are the core functionality like sharing, correlation, and so on, and being able to at least sustain the model with all the different use cases. Maybe something to mention here is one thing that we noticed is that the moment we open up the specific sharing that applies to any of these sectors, the players within this sector are more likely to share indicators that are more interesting for our use case as well. So this has been a very beneficial process, and we're always looking for other sectors that we haven't opened up yet to approach them or let them approach us. And so we can discuss what are their needs so they can start sharing within their own sector the information that makes sense for them. And then it will be a natural process for them to transition into sharing the type of threat indicators that we also exchange already.
Yeah. So if you have new use case and so on, feel free to come by and then we can discuss about it.
Exactly.
So to have a quick overview of the, I would say, core element within MISP, you have still the core project, which is the software, the backend, where the API resides, where the data store is operated, and so on. It's mainly PHP. Python script is there for supporting a lot of export and import. And then you have additional elements that in the MISP project, like the modules. It's Python modules where you can do expansions, import, export, and so on. You can write in Python a lot of things to expand MISP without touching the core. And then we have other things like taxonomies that are basically libraries of classifications and so on. Initially, it was like a small side project to fix our tag problems, and then now it's growing. Some other organizations are using it for their own tools, so it's fine. For us, it's a benefit because if people are using same taxonomies among different tools. Like for example, a lot of open source projects are basically relying on taxonomies or the galaxies. Galaxies are basically like taxonomies, but much more advanced. You can express much more complex things. You have currently galaxies with threat actors, preventive measures, ransomware, and plenty of other things. So it's really something that you can customize. We might come with additional tools in the future in the relationship models regarding the galaxy to make it even more useful within the platforms. That's maybe for the next 3 months. Then we have the warning list. It's a list that we maintain for limiting the false positive. So it's basically a list of known things, like, for example, Microsoft 360 network elements. But that allow users to automatically detect false positive within the MISP program. And then recently we introduced the object. So there's a full-blown database of schema. So schema that you can use to describe composite object of attributes in MISP. So it was one of the major drawbacks previously in the previous version of MISP. Now you have objects, so you can basically describe a set of composite objects, and it's very flexible, and you can create relationship among object and even among object and attributes.
Yeah, and maybe something to mention with the objects. Right now we already have a large default predefined set of objects, templates that you can use to create your own objects. So for example, file object, network object, and so on. But one of the things that we also made sure that would be in the mechanisms in there, and it's going to be exposed soon in a new release, will be the opportunity for users to create templates on the fly in MISP. So the idea is that we wanted to keep a more flexible model than having pre-structured objects, because one of the things we're noticing is the more other communities we're interacting with, they have a different idea of what should be in such an object than what we have, or different ideas of what kind of object should exist in the first place. So what we try to do is to keep a very sane, simple structure that allows you to create your own templates on the fly.
Yeah. You see a demonstration of the object. For example, you have a new full-blown advanced import for files. So now if you import portable executable files within MISP, you basically get a full set of objects with each section's relationship between the section and so on. So it's very nifty for any parsing tools and so on. And it's very convenient to generate your own schema. So if you want to create for a specific format of file that no one knows about, just describing the JSON files, and it takes, if you know the format in one you can do it. So, another thing that a lot of people ask, will you be ever on version 2.4? And the answer is yes. So we dish the release of 3.0, 2.5 and so on. Basically, the object was foreseen for us.
We would be on 4.0 right now with the object release. So we kind of stopped doing it. One of the things that we noticed was that some organizations have a very long wind-up period for any new release, meaning they sometimes need half a year of notice and testing and so on before they can put it into production by their own internal rules. However, what we're told by these organizations was that having patch-level changes would not need these sort of adjustments for them and testing periods, so they could directly update. So we're 2.4 forever. So don't expect anything to change. Of course, the downside for us and the upside for all the users out there is that we need to keep all the versions compatible with one another. So that means that starting from 2.4.1, synchronization and so on should work out of the box between any version out there, and we'll make sure to maintain that.
So that basically the release cycle would be like home, where you basically just have a commit ID associated. So basically you have the branch 2.4 that there, if you git pull from that one, you basically get the stable version of it. And then if we do more complex development or more long-term development, it would be in the development branch, which is named after the features, and then we merge it back into it. If it's a small fix, usually you can do a request directly on the 2.4 branch. I think that's it for that. No, we maintain changelog for MISP, obviously. But we do it for PyMISP too, and so on, so you can see exactly how it's going in the evolutions of compatibility between the API. Because we have seen that more people are using PyMISP, so we want to basically keep in mind. And the versions mentioned in PyMISP can be enforced, so you basically get a warning if the version is mentioned. Okay, so going back to what we did for the past, I would say, last 7-8 months. We did many things, but I just want to highlight some of the things that you can show the different kind of user that we have in our community. When we released the 2.47 it was mainly due to one interesting request that we get. A lot of people were asking for having the user interface working for Braille terminal. So we are not blind, but some people are blind or some deficiency for vision. So they came with some recommendations. So we try to maintain MISP to be at least for visually impaired people to have the MISP user access just like anyone else. It's a way of doing it, and we discovered that basically in the intelligence community it's something very common. So having people having a Braille terminal and so on. Many things has been done, but now you have a nifty button on the diagnostic page where you can update MISP. If your permission is fine, your SLinux, AppArmor, whatever, it should work. If you send to us, maybe troubles, but it's another story. Something else too, its synchronizations code has been utterly simplified. We completely get rid of the 2.3 codes. We were assuming after having 2 years of...
I think at this point, if someone asks you to synchronize with their 2.3 instance, it's very safe to say, no, we won't do that. 2+ years of old outdated software shouldn't security
we introduced some new type like Sigma. There's a talk at AKU about Sigma. It's a very interesting format because it's like the Yara rules for CM. It's an interesting format. We want to go a bit deeper in that format. Right now we just support the format as this, but we want maybe to have parser within MISP to support it directly. In 2071, many things have been improved, but a lot of we try to put the majority of things through the API, so on the interface. Something that is quite interesting too, the organization blacklisting. Because we have a rule at MISP, we don't enable by default new features. And it was a mistake, because for some case it was really useful, and a lot of people, I didn't know about this feature, yeah, it's disabled by default. One of them is the organization blacklist. So you can silently blacklist an organizations doing a bit of a mess on your infrastructure or community, but they can still get the data out of it. So it's an interesting functionality, because like that they are basically silently blocked to push anything and pollute the networks with the communities and share some information, but they still get access to it. Something else that a lot of the format itself for MISP are now all internal draft, and we plan to go in that way. So it's one way for us to maintain documentation for people integrating MISP with other tools. That's another thing that is important. I think this one is mainly the one for the large list instance with many bug fix. We need some improvement, but it's not so good. Then we had the hackathon in May, and one of the features that we did with the Hive was the integration of Cortex protocol and Cortex within MISP. So Cortex was now supporting the MISP module format, and then you can either use the MISP modules within Cortex, or you can within MISP use Cortex Hive. So it's a nifty way, and then you can, if for the one using the Hive, you don't need to, for example, have running in parallel Cortex services and MISP modules. You pick the one that you want. That's it. So the nice thing with open source project is basically people work together. We are not competitors. We are not like vendors and so on, fighting between each other to get more customers. We find that it's nice to have users using different tools, and we just want to integrate more. So that's something important. Then a major improvement was the feeds. So now you can even cache feeds within MISP. So you don't need to import the data within MISP itself. It's cached into the Redis backend. The nice effect of that is you can even quickly compare feeds. So I don't know if you can see it, but on the left side here you see the name of the feeds. This one is the numbering of the feed, and then you see the number of overlap between two feeds. So imagine that you purchase proprietary feeds and you want to see how many overlap you have with storage node feeds, and you can automatically find out which one is taking the data from the other.
Additionally, maybe here, besides the overlap itself, what's interesting is that until now you needed to ingest all those feeds into your MISP, which meant that sometimes you had feeds with massive amounts of indicators, maybe things that you don't necessarily want to store, but the correlations still gave you additional values. So what you can do now is just cache those values. So what MISP will do is it will go crawl those feeds, get all the values, hash them, and put them in Redis, and you still get the correlation aspect out of it. So that means that when you browse an event, it will still tell you this indicator is already known by that feed, and so on. So one of the use cases that we might want to do in the future is, for example, file hash whitelisting, something that will be utterly crazy to store directly in your database. But as a cached Redis thing, it might make sense to have that lookup immediately available for you.
Yeah. And you basically, from the event itself, you see the correlations with the respective feeds. So just like normal correlations. Then that know that you have a list of default feeds in MISP. You basically have a list of additional feeds provider. If you want to add one or propose one, it's easy. There's a simple JSON format for exchanging feeds, so you can even create your feeds. So if you have even a vendor and you want to provide a feed to others, to your customers, you can just support the JSON format, and that's it. You basically get the. Another very important feature, and this one is, I think, key nowadays. What we try to do is to have a flexible public PubSub models within MISP. So meaning that every action that you do in MISP will be published on the PubSub channels. So what is the use case for that? We have many use cases, but one of them, for example, is CIEM integrations. You automatically want to do lookup again your CIEM for any data coming into MISP. You can do it through the PubSub channels. PubSub channels include delete of user, logins, sightings. The sightings is there too. So it's really a way to quickly get notification from MISP without using the API. The nice thing with that, you don't need to query, make complex query, interrogating the backend and so on. You just get the data and you can just do whatever with it directly. So you can even use it for indexing and so on. It's nice.
And the timing, of course, so it's all real time. So the moment it lands in your system, no matter what the source of the data is, it will directly go to whatever script you're running and ingesting that data.
Yeah, and it's a standard ZMQ channel, so if you want to plug it into Kafka or whatever other scheme that you have for streaming, it works. We have some additional thing that we will put into the PubSub, but if you want to use it, we have a Python script in the tool, and it's a simple tool to use. Okay, this one was like a major fix for performance. Those two versions was for performance issues, so we discovered some, I would say,
interesting behaviors of MySQL.
So edge cases of MySQL and so on. So it fixed a lot of bugs from some other users, depending on the version of MySQL you are using and so on. And lookup was much more faster. So it was really a release for speed. 77, we receive a lot of, at regular interval, we receive a lot of pen test report and so on, which is great. And we get a recommendation regarding password, and we wanted to have it integrated as soon as possible. So nowadays in MISP, everything is baked, and there's an automatic conversion. So if you are coming from null versions, it automatically converts to bcrypt. So you might still have database done that are mixed or user depending on.
The user has to log in for the upgrade to happen, so that means that you probably have a database with some users that haven't logged in, it's still at the old password hash. But for everyone else, it gets upgraded automatically the moment you log in.
Another thing that is really interesting too is we improve the screenshot indicators including. So it's the search output, it will be displayed, so you have small thumbnails with a screenshot. We have seen a lot of more and more users are using screenshot for taking evidences and so on. So I think in the future we'll have an object for screenshot.
And I think the cuckoo export, for example, will automatically create screenshots of the execution.
So it can be even an animated GIF to display different things. Another thing is some people are now using MISP into kind of cloud services. So they want to manage a lot of roles and so on automatically. So we included the roles from the API. Then we started to add, so we were basically just fixing all the type that we have to match what we described in the new object. And we fixed an important security bug. This one is quite important, but it's only for the one using sharing groups. So I don't know if a lot of people are using sharing groups here, but if you have the versions below that one and you're using sharing groups, better to upgrade. Yes, something else regarding reporting vulnerabilities. We have this tendency to request CVE numbers for everything that could be security related. So we work as a third, so we usually becoming a kind of upset from some vendors that doesn't want to allocate CVE because they said, yeah, it could be security, but we know CVE numbers, not really there. So we allocate CVE number for MISP if you see something that could be security related, CVE. Which is a kind of disadvantage for us, but we don't really care about that. Some people do statistics about number of vulnerabilities for software and they base it on CVE numbers, which is statistically wise not a very good idea, but that's okay. So if you see a lot of people saying, hey, you have tons of CVE, yes, indeed. And now in a contributing page, we have even a note regarding reporting security vulnerabilities. But I think it's important for us because our users are basically security people. And if something happens, or in a specific edge case, we don't know which kind of sharing group you have, in which area you work, it's better to be informed early than later. So that's why we allocate those CVE numbers. 79 was just a preparation for the object things. So now you can basically do all taxonomies actions through the API. So it's quite flexible. And now the Galaxy include all the might attack type. So it's basically an automatic export from attack into Galaxy, so you can use it. So that's why we want to extend a bit the Galaxy for relationship.
Maybe just for the point before, what is interesting with the feeds being exposed via the APIs, if you have an external tools that you have interconnected with MISP, something that you can do is, what you do with these feeds is there are the CSV and so on format feeds out there, and MISP will automatically. So.
Just a little bit to the side.
Yeah, sorry.
Is it okay for you?
Okay. So yeah, if you have MISP interconnected with all these feeds, what happens is all these CSV feeds and so on get parsed by MISP, and the parsing also categorizes all of those indicators that it finds in those feeds for ingestion. And sometimes what you might want to do is you might want to use MISP to loop through your data flow through MISP to get these parsed feeds already parsed via MISP into some other tool, for example. So what you can do with this feed preview is you can go through MISP, fetch the feed, and the feed will come back as a parsed MISP stat feed already, instead of a CSV or just a text block that was there before.
Yeah. Then this one was one of the biggest releases because a branch of object that was there for
5 months.
5 months, yes. So was it basically merged without too much bugs, I would say. Yeah. So now we basically have the support for object, which is, I think, one of the major features that we did, and I think this one is quite important because it's increasing MISP to really complete new area of work. So you can basically combine object and so on, and then attach relationship to it. We release a set of templates. We have around 20 templates, calling file templates. We have templates for all binary format that we know, like P, ELF, macOS format, and so on. We have also things like geolocalizations, URLs, we have even victims, phone numbers, and stuff like that. So those one could be just using MISP. And the nice thing with it is you benefit from the sharing in MISP. So if you have already connection with other MISP, every time you use the object, if the other MISP is basically up to date, you get the object synchronized and so on. So it's really part of the normal workflow of MISP. You get the object. Then you get relationship types. We come with a list of relationships. It's not a fixed list. So we basically borrow some from sticks. We find it a bit limited to some other things, so we add more stuff, especially for malware, for example, Exfiltrate 2, Beacons 2, and stuff like that we added. But it's still, you are still not bound to this model, so you can add your relationship. So it's really flexible.
The idea is similar as what we did with taxonomies, to provide the same default that we encourage people to use. But of course, you can always go around, like in taxonomies, create your own tag. You can also use a custom relationship between those things. Some of the things that this opens up to, besides the examples here, is you can, for example, also just chain together objects in any kind of logical fashion. For example, if you want to create a timeline between the various objects, you can absolutely do that with these relationships.
We have some idea of converting output of forensic keys into this project. And I think Raphael will show some part of integration of Leaf with this. An example that we have here, it's a common problem is how do you share information about DGA? The problem is those one are dynamic domains, they are generated. So if you just share one domain, it's basically just one domain. So it's not linked to anything. So now we have a regex object, which is describing the DGA. And then you can even link this object.
Yeah, so if you look at this, the blue object here is the object itself, so that's the regex object. And then you have two references linking to these attributes from the object, saying that they're referenced by the phrase derived from. And then you have the links to the actual instances of those domains that were created using this DGA.
And as you can see, for objects within MISP, they are just behaving like a normal attribute. So you still benefit from the distributions, you still benefit from the attribute level tagging.
So
correlations is exactly the same. So basically you just see object as packages. The nice thing with the object is the template itself can even evolve over time. There's revision systems behind. So even the format change, you can still get the data, you can modify it, but you can still benefit from the data. But you have plenty of use case with the object. It's just the early beginning of it. We did some new thing in 2.4.81 that's been released last week. Was basically the graphical representation has been significantly improved, including object. Now you have key shortcuts mapping, which is easy for navigator or modules and so on, and you have a view of the iCloud elements.
Yeah, one of the things that we were really missing in MISP is getting an overview about, for example, if you just want to see what kind of data do I have that this threat actor is linked to, you didn't really have an easy way of doing it. So now you can just go to the threat actor within your galaxies and immediately get an image of everything that is related to threat actors. So indicators belonging to that, so on, and graph it out.
Then it was the first experimental export for the sticks 2.0. I think it was a good, I would say, a good experiment, not only for us but for Oasis, because we had a long chat and discussion with them regarding the meaning of some part of the document. For your information, Sticks 2.0 is still not officially published, so it's still a working draft. It's just due to a legal issue with Oasis. They will release it soon. Basically, what we want to do is to support the export. The only problem that we have is we are missing some field types, like financial indicators, like some other formats that we try to have in Sticks, but the process of having new types in Sticks is very long. So that means for us, Sticks is just a format that there to be able to be used for tools or to be ingested by other tools that are using Sticks as a format. In parallel, we still maintain the Sticks export that we have, the 1.1. It's there. Some people are using it. So that's just the beginning. So if you have already some tools, and I'm surprised if you have already, but some tool using Sticks 2.0, I'm interested to get feedback to see if it works, if you have any issue. So that's basically it for what we did for the past 7 months. Then, aside MISP, other thing is MISP now completely supports the offline creation of MISP events, so you don't need to be connected to generate events. We have a full-blown library that is able to create events. Now, basically, we have JSON schema for everything. So, for the format itself and so on are validated through schema. And those ones are basically linked to the Internet Graph versions. There are additional tooling within MISP to support OpenIOC, Sticks, Neo4j, and so on. The code has been recently quite simplified, and all the API that you have within MISP are accessible to MISP. We still are working on a digital signature to have digital signatures into the JSON object. This one is a very tough part, because all data is not static, it's dated and so on, so if you have digital signature, you need to date it. So it's still very experimental, but at some point it might be integrated into MISP. We have other repositories like warning lists, taxonomies, everything that we do work. We have contribution for taxi server, where it's basically hooked to a taxi back to MISP, and you can do an automatic import. This one is sponsored by BAE, but it's basically just there for existing taxi services. The best is basically have to MISP communication, obviously, but depending on what your integration case. Galaxy Snow is even more than that, but we have tons of new clusters with threat actor, adversary tools, and so on. More will come soon, and we might even expand the elements where we can include into the Galaxy. So I think the RFC has been updated with the Internet Graph. That's, I would say, normal day-to-day activities. So what's cooking? So that's maybe the interesting part for a lot of people. So we have something that is used and so on, and what are we doing for the future? So improvement for MISP object, we have already some ideas. So some are already there. So the graphical representation of MISP object in the event view is not there, but in the graphical view is there. Support of objects in the MISP modules are still not there, so it's something that we want to extend. And being able to edit the object from the user interface, and that will be something that we want to use. Yeah. And expanding of the API. So that's basically related to MISP object, so it's very short-term things. No, that's the other thing. So it's our list of growing features that we rearrange depending on the needs of people and the moon positions and various things. So one of the things that we are working on is the distributed sightings. So right now, if you use the sightings in MISP, you can cite things, but it will remain into your MISP, so it's not shared. what we want to do is to have functionalities where you can even bridge copy the sightings into other MISP instances. So you can know that others have seen the same data. But there are some challenges regarding privacy and so on. So we came with some idea. And it's somehow linked, but it's not directly linked to the privacy of our data structures. We have already a prototype where you can export MISP into data structures that are very complex to reverse. So when you have case of very sensitive indicators that you want to share, you can still do a lookup against it. Another use case is, for example, bank accounts. If you have an accounting system like SAP or whatever, and you want to automatically test against new bank account, and you cannot get the new bank account, you can test against the data structure that is privacy aware. It's one way to basically exchange indicators. Regarding the digital signatures, we need new things like the organizations opt-in. So currently with MISP, each organization gets a new ID. So if you want to basically create an organization, you need to create a new ID. But what we want to do in the future is to be able to have a centralized way, a registry of all the organizations that are obviously opt-in. So like that, it's easier for other maintainers to get information about specific organizations. Same with the feeds and same with the community. Is if we could share the feeds directly, we could have a centralized way to exchange different feeds or even discover a community. Some people have the problem that, okay, they install MISP, they are working in a specific field of activities, I don't know, biological sector, whatever, or chemistry or oil industry, but you don't know if there is an existing community of people sharing information for that specific community. That's one of the objectives, is to basically create a model where you can announce your community to a registry, and people can just need to register to the one that they want. A long-standing one that we want to have is basically user-specific, so changing the user behavior and the UI behavior based on the kind of users. As an example, you are a fraud analyst in a bank. You don't really care about mutex or pattern memory. You just care about your bank account details. So like that, you can customize MISP to just have a view that is related to your activity.
This will also open up a lot of other features that have been in the pipe for a long time, and this is a blocker for us. For example, getting alerts via emails when specific things happen, and those rules should be definable by the users. All of these things, the main blocker for us is basically user-specific settings. Hope we'll clear that.
Another one that we have seen is some organizations like law enforcement and police are using MISP, but what they really want to do is to be able to share large evidence with the MISP. MISP, you can already share sample and so on, but when you have 4 terabytes hard disk acquisitions, it's a bit large to share within synchronization and so on. So we want to support in MISP a model where you could share large evidence and then share them back with some organizations. Another one, and this one is, I think, a very important one, is to have an overlay on the user interface to make annotation on the event itself. So instead of just doing some command and so on, you can basically do annotation over the event from MISP and then share it back. So like that, you have the view of the analyst and the command. We have already some plan for doing it, but the idea behind is basically to use existing transport mechanism and so on within MISP, but just to have an interface that is updated to have the analyst do. Like we have the thank you all the thing projects, now we have a tagging all the thing projects. The idea is basically to apply the taxonomies and the tagging not only at event level or attribute level, but everywhere in the system. So tagging like organizations, users, and so on. We have seen that some people want to be able to classify their analysts. So, for example, you have analysts that are very good at doing malware reversing. Then you can use specific tags and attach it to the users. And then you can start to play with it to have feedback of analysts. If someone is doing annotations and the analyst is known to be a reverser for a specific malware, it makes sense. But if someone is not expert in the field, you might, for example, adjust the credibility of the information that you get. That's one of the things that's good. Sticks report, so we start to introduce it. It's basically following what going on at the Oasis CTI going on. So we will have some stuff popping up more and more, but it's just one of the formats we want to support. Another one that we want to support is KSUCO. Europol agreed that it will be their format for evidence acquisition and sharing. So for us, it's a feature that is really needed for law enforcement. We have one of those experimental projects called the Darwin Project, which is a bit different. It's a lot of people say, okay, MISP is great, but I want something that I can show off to managers or people that have not that much clue about the techniques, or to be able to support engineers that doesn't know what to do with data. So, as an example, the idea behind is to have a tool that is analyzing what is within MISP and export the information to be usable for the forensic analyst. As an example, you get pattern in memory. What can I do with that? What kind of tool can I use? How can I use it? So, for example, if you have a pattern in memory, it will be translated into natural language, into something you can use, for example, volatility, if you have done the memory requisitions, and using this pattern to find out how to use the pattern. So it's basically a tool for analysts to use the data within it. Or, on the contrary, is to generate from the technical information some more tactical. We have a project with some partners in Europe about that, is to be able to generate out of the data tactical information. So to deduce how the attacker or the adversary works based on the technical information that you can collect. The integrated modules API to field ingestion.
So basically, one of the things that is missing right now is via the feeds we already have all these parsers for the various formats out there by our import modules. And we have a feed system, an API system that allows you to fetch data from various sources. However, we haven't brought the two things together. So you cannot say, for example, that I want to ingest this Stix feed using my Stix parser. And one of the things that we're missing is just kind of the glue between those two things. So right now, if, the feed ingestion happens either via MISP's own format, either via CSV parsing or free text parsing. But we cannot reuse our modules to ingest it. So this is something that we need to change in the future. Same thing with the API. Right now, we have a search API that can return the data in either JSON format, XML format, or OpenIOC format. But we don't have something that allows you to reuse, again, those modules to do the exports based on those search terms. So we have separate APIs, for example, for the Stix export. We have a separate API for OpenIOC is also tied into but for all these other formats, for Suricata, for example, or Grow. And one of the things you want to do is have one API for searching on the event level, one API to search on the attribute level, and then choose the output format based on whatever modules you have available. So this is a refactoring job that we still have ahead of us. That will also allow you to use all of the filter options that are there for the search API to reuse them in all the specific APIs for all the other formats, export formats. Yeah.
Then we have still this project that was starting with some years ago with the gamification of the sharing aspect to find a way to promote the sharing aspect in MISP. The problem is basically a kind of paradox with MISP, because in MISP we introduce a mechanism to have sharing groups and so on, where you can still silo information into specific area. On the other hand, what we want is that people share more information and everyone can benefit. So you have a kind of equilibrium aspect or game theory aspect where you have to find the best approach of both. So that's why we want to do in MISP a kind of gamifications where people can get some level and so on.
Yeah, also another thing that we noticed was that a huge barrier for actually sharing information besides all the legal aspects and so on is simply that it takes effort to do so. It takes some effort, even though we try to make it as simple as possible to encode that data and so on. And what we've noticed as well with the gamification part of GitHub, for example, is it's a very good motivator for people to sit down and actually do those things. So we will see how it works. We've seen an interesting talk on this topic, and that inspired us. First, we just sat in there thinking that it would be pointless, but turned out to be extremely interesting and inspiring for us. So we'll see where it goes.
Something that we want to improve is the feed analysis. When you have seen the map, the matrix of the overlap, you see that this one is at one specific moment in time. So it's not over specific here. So you don't have this kind of third level showing you the historical aspect. What we want to do is to be able to see the evolution of indicators within different feeds. So you can see that this indicator has been seen in this feed 2 days before, and then later it has been seen in this feed. So you can even see which feed is the most fresh compared to the others. There are some challenges on that part regarding the volume of data and how we have to do it. So it's an interesting development, but it's something that we can do. All one, and that is still very important, is the notification filtering. Right now, you have a very basic notification scheme in MISP for email notification and so on. We want to introduce user customizations, which is basically linked to the user-specific UI settings. That's pretty important. Synchronization and export improvement, that's, I would say, continuous work, because the more you exchange data, more you basically rely on synchronizations, and then more data you exchange, you want to basically make it more efficient. So we try to work on that part too. Another thing is, and this one came from various discussions, but we recently had a third, where some organizations doesn't have this kind of even view, but they really want to start from the adversary perspective, the attacker's perspective, and so on. So we wanted to propose in MISP that the galaxy that we have are the pivot instead of event. So you have in addition some kind of galaxy view where you can see, for example, I want to look at everything going on in APT 29, and then I can pivot on this one back to the event. So it's a different model. Something else is we have a graphical view right now. This one is only for view. You can expand correlation and so on, but you cannot edit or add your attributes within the graphical representations. We want to change that. So like that, instead of using just the user interface, you can use the graphical view.
Yeah. One of the ideas here is that you already have all of these tools, just not exposed to that graph. And one of the things that we want to do is, one of the biggest hurdles of doing this actually is the ownership of the data. And what we want to do is to have a seamless interface where you can just add data to any object out there. For example, if you have an event even of a different organization, you'll be able to add stuff to it, and it will automatically generate attributes or proposals out of it based on whether you have access to editing the data or not. So it should make the whole process of identifying data that belongs together, tagging data that belongs together, and adding data to data that belongs together by the graph view easy.
Then user interface and usability. Still, we are not, we are not interface designer, so I think you have seen that. But we want to improve on that part. So it's something that we really need to work on. That's something that we will do maybe with the help of other graphical UX designer. But we want to keep it as simple as possible. So we don't want to make it shiny. The thing that is very important for us is to make it working for analysts. Something else in the queue is more like, I would say, background activities, but we had a new queuing library that has been rewritten in Python to get rid of the PHP one. So that's something that we need to do as a migration.
So basically, if you have any open issues about the scheduler and so on, this is the reason why we don't really care, because we know it's going to be thrown out very soon anyway. And we're going to have something better than
better and simple, and then we can even schedule easier stuff into the space. And then it's a constant work that we do with everything that we do in MISP. We want to do it through the API because we see that sometimes machine to machine are better, sometimes human to machine, so it's really something important for us. PyMISP integrations would be more with PyGalaxy and PyTaxonomy, so that you can basically do the work directly in PyMISP. You can already do a lot of things, maybe Jean-Paul will talk about it, but some asynchronous support for Python key would be added, and then the authority support to, in addition to the digital signature, you want to verify your signature, so you need to get the keys and so on. So it's some extension that need to be done in PyMISP. Okay, so for us, it's, I think one of the key elements in MISP is basically that we get feedback from people. We do that way we do trainings and so on. We have one foreseen the 21st of November, and we have a kind of developer meeting the day after in Luxembourg. There is, I think, still 1 or 2 slots for the training. For the developer meeting, we have still some more slots. So if you want to join, you are more than welcome. The thing is, what we want to do is not MISP. Is the core part is basically that we want to change practices regarding information sharing. So everything we do is basically to improve information sharing. Then we experiment it with MISP. So that's basically the thing. So if at one point you want to get in touch with us, Gitter, whatever, what you prefer. If you want at some point you have some priorities and so on, we would be interested to hear what are in the list of this following list of features, the thing that you really want. It is like a kind of blocking for you. Because usually we reorder the priority based on really what a lot of users want. For example, the object was one that everyone wanted, so that's why we focus on that one, but if at some point you see that you have one feature that you really want, just get back to us. By the way, we have a hackathon on Friday, so for the one that is still there, in the same room here, on Friday we do an open source security software hackathon. So you are more than welcome. Hackathon is not only one that are doing programming, it could be analyst, it could be creating taxonomies, it could be creating documentations, editing documentation, so it's all we work. Okay, so usually we share a lot of information as to what we do and so on Twitter. A lot of our projects are below MISP. If you want to report vulnerabilities and so on, send it to info@circle.lu. And there's a UGP fingerprint for the keys that you can use. Because some people tend to have inserted some fake keys for circle.lu, so double check the fingerprint before sending all the information. That's quite important. So that's it for the introductions. I just have a quick announce regarding a new initiative that we start, and then we go for the Any questions? No? Any questions?
Yeah. Hi. Great presentation. Thanks for sharing. So, I guess my question is not per se around MISP itself, but more about the use case. You guys have been working really hard developing all of these features, or you're in contact with these users in the community. What are some of the changes that you've seen within threat intelligence and sharing? What are some of the top 3 things that you changed in the last year?
I mean, maybe the most obvious one is what is being shared has changed quite a bit over time. So initially when we started out, it was very basic things that got shared in general. I mean, from IP addresses, domain names, and so on. And nowadays, I mean, we get everything from Yara rules and so on being shared. So it's more a complexity of what is being shared. And this is why we had to move towards the object. I mean, that was one of the things that came up. And then the other thing is also, very often it's also context around the data that is being shared. That wasn't shared as much before. It was very strange because when we started, several organizations expressly asked us not to include anything that can be used to share context because nobody would share that anyway.
Yeah.
And nowadays it has changed quite a lot. So this is why we moved towards the galaxies and so on. So all these things are coming up more and more, and we're seeing these groups being formed that are doing very open sharing between each other. And then sharing more the technical data with broader groups out there. So maybe that's the biggest observation, I think.
Regarding the type of information being shared, I mean, the first use case we had was MD5 and sample of malware, then come to IP addresses and so on. And as I mentioned, we get requests for new objects. Recently, we get requests for car plate, which is not a use case, but it seems that a lot of people start to look at what guys in security are doing, or at least cyber security in general. And looking at what they want to do is they want to apply this model to other kind of communities. And that's why we try to support them. And for us, and I see it's linked to Luxembourg, but it's linked to what Europe wants to, is the relationship with the financial sectors and the cyber security. I think at the early days when we were thinking of exchanging bank accounts, it was like a no-go, but nowadays it's really growing in that directions. Something else that we have seen, and that's linked to what Andras mentioned, is basically the bridging of the informations. Initially, we had a lot of private clubs not sharing any informations, and then they start to share more information. So just sharing indicators like is not what they really want nowadays, but it's to have the context of the informations. And that's, I think, the one that it's going to. So that's more like is machine and human readable. So it's really the thing that they really want.
Maybe in addition to that, something that has been interesting is that the sharing has very much, at least from our perspective, moved from this whole content producer and then whoever is buying or getting that data to more of a dialogue systems. And it's very interesting, for example, what we've seen. Initially, a lot of organizations and communities that we've dealt with, for example, did sneered at anything being shared that was not a complete analysis in publishable format without any false positive sense. And what we are seeing now is people are starting to share the data as soon as they get something in there that even looks suspicious to them. And then they're kind of crowdsourcing the analysis on that. And basically being able to leverage your community to actually get ahead of the curve. And, you know, for example, one of the things that pops up very often is some organizations having their own teams for doing analysis and so on, but maybe not being as advanced as some others in the community. One of the things that popped up is memory analysis, for example, with some organizations lacking the capability for it. So they just publish their analysis as they would normally, as quickly as possible, and then they get feedback from other organizations. And this whole process has...
that's one link with pre-sharing.
Exactly.
We had case in Luxembourg where we go to some very small banks, so in private banking, they have like 40, 50 people, so they just have one or two in the staff. And they say, why I would share it? It's not a benefit. That's their point of view. But we had some case with one of the banks that was very interesting. One of the guys get MISP access and he said, okay, I will not use it. And one day he had a suspicious binary, but he doesn't know what to do with it. He don't want to put it on Aristotle. He said, okay, not to share it. Then he created an event on MISP and push it. And then 2 hours later, you had other people in the MISP instances, a lot of malware reverser. And you know, malware reverser, the first thing they look is fresh malware, fresh stuff. Because they are really into. And then 2 people pop up on this and did basically the analysis because it was very interesting to do. So I think pre-sharing is very important, and that's why we are in a kind of I would say strong discussion within Oasis CTI. Sticks is nice on paper, but the thing is, when you want to share information, you don't have all the information in advance that you want to share. You don't have the perfect things to share, but you still want to share it and then to extend it. And that's why we are trying to push them a bit that Stick should at least support some way of sharing more, and that you can expand an existing group of events. Or that's the trend that we see. Maybe
maybe another thing that is interesting is and these developments exactly. And I mean, in terms of how the community reacted to these changes, is that initially this whole discussion of whether you should enforce sharing by the community and you should require others to share before they can get access to the data has been complete nonsense. And we now see that the biggest value in trying to get your community to actually share data is to show them the value of actually what happens if they share the data. And you know, the moment you share it, you might get validation on your data, you might get additional context on that data that you would normally not get. And because of this, I mean, what we're trying to do now is to have almost no requirement, basically no requirement to share anything unless you want to. And what organizations are noticing is that there is value in sharing your data. And I think, one of our takeaways is don't put any rules on your community to share data because it doesn't make sense.
Hope it answers your questions. Yeah. Okay. Additional questions?
I don't know if I understood this correctly. Will I be able to import Sticks data into MISP soon?
Sticks 1 you can.
Sticks 1 you can already.
So Sticks 2 we still need some time. So Sticks 1 right now you can't directly through MISP, but we have an external tool for it. that you can pipe your data through its 1.1 format, or 1.1 or 1.2 format, and then it will ingest it and create MISP events out of it.
Okay, so, and it's linked basically to the discussion that we had. The question from Raymond was quite good because it's linked here to what we are doing. For the past year, we had a lot of discussion because some people contacted the MISP project because they want to set up their sharing communities or the information sharing analysis center and so on. And they were confused by MISP as a software and the various communities around MISP. And what we always say, basically MISP is a core software, and then you have various communities, like the one at NATO, the one at Circle, the one at Fidelis, for example, and all that. So that's basically different communities. But we have seen that a lot of people want to use the software and basically bootstrap the system. So we came with a kind of discussion on this. As Circle, as a CERT, we provide threat intelligence to our constituency and some partners worldwide, so people get access to it. Some people ask us, because we build some information sharing platforms and so on, they ask us, okay, how to build your ISAC, how to build a trusted group for information sharing, or to build a kind of CSIRT network where you exchange information. So it was, for the past year, a kind of continuous discussion about who is providing what and so on. So we wanted to create kind of initiative where basically the MISP project and various partners, for example Circle in this case, but could be other additional one, provide the platforms where people can connect their ISAC and start from somewhere. So that's it, bootstrap it. So that's why we started the initiative. So it's not an organization policy and so on, it's just an initiative. It's basically we started with 3 partners, but more will come. So it's basically the project MISP itself, which is basically providing the background infrastructure, so the software, the format, and the taxonomies and the classifications. And then you need someone to support you to basically give you at least some data, because if you start an ISAC and you have no data to share, it's not really a good idea. So you need to have a bootstrap. So Circle is already providing it to various partners, so they will say, okay, we could provide it to other ISACs. And then we are in Luxembourg, the Cybersecurity Competence Center, which is like where we also have training and so on nowadays, that could support us to do trainings for ISAC. So what we wanted to do is to create this initiative where new ISAC or new trusted group that want to create something from scratch can get support. So, and to get in touch with us, and then they can benefit from what we can already provide. So the goal is again, to get a view of what the users are doing with information sharing and being able to get more about the requirements. An example is a lot of ISAC contacted us because they create their taxonomies. They create their own taxonomies for different fields of activities. In this case, we can even discuss about between ISACs which kind of common taxonomy would make sense. How do you bridge information? How do you filter the information? And MISP design could be standalone, could be peer-to-peer, or could be even bridge or mixed. That's the goal behind the initiative, is to support that. So it's really the beginning, but at least it's to really make it clear that the MISP software and project is just a project, it's not providing the data itself and so on. So the idea behind too is some of the feeds that we provide, maybe through MISP, could be provided through ProSISAC, which is more like the appropriate interface for data. So like we have a clear separation between the MISP core software and the MISP communities using the data. So if you want to join, ProSISAC is very straightforward. You can go to the web page, you get that you need some data like the York UID if you're already a MISP, the PGP and so on, and that's it. With that, you can already bootstrap your ISAC. You basically get the MISP connections, and you can get the data. We just do a basic evaluations of the organizations. As long as you are not completely shady and so on, you should get access to the data. Okay, so that's basically it. Now we can switch to the object part.